Everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to be making some fried pork tenderloin sandwiches on homemade pretzel buns with some home fries and spiced apples. So let's start by getting our potatoes prepped up for our dinner. So I'm not sure I'm going to use all four, but I'm going to cut up three and see how much French fry that makes for me. It just varies. So we're going to do I'm going to just kind of cut them like the regular French fry way. I like to do, various ways. But we're going to go classic today. And we're going to do our seasoning on them. We're going to do a little bit of olive oil, flour, some panko breadcrumbs, and some Lowry seasoned salt to have just some really lovely kind of flavors in it that are going to go well with our pork tenderloin. Okay. I have some pretty long French fries. I always never know until I have them cut up exactly how many that I'm going to use. But I figured I was like, this is one of Torrin's favorite meals. He loves fried pork tenderloin sandwiches. And I figured since not all the kids liked the shark yesterday, I'd give them a meal they love today. So this is a family favorite through here. And I've done it in various ways. A lot of times I just do it on a brioche bun, but today we're going to make homemade pretzel rolls because my homemade pretzels are, again, a family favorite. Okay, let's get our things here. I think I'll be good with just three. And then I have a couple apples. We're just going to do a basic cinnamon spiced apples with some brown sugar, give it a little bit more rich flavor. And I just feel like with pork, apples just go really well together. And when you're making your French fries, just try to cut them as evenly as possible with all the other ones so they cook up roughly around the same time. If you have any that are a lot thicker than the others, those won't get tender in time. There we go. Yep, we can do one more. We'll do the more uniform potato. And we're going to boil off our pretzels here. I have it proofing my dough, proofing in the oven. It's a yeast dough, so I never make my pretzel sourdough because my recipe for regular pretzels, my son told me that I'm never allowed to try to make a sourdough pretzel because you can't ruin perfection, he says. They're his favorite, absolute favorite things that I make. He just loves my pretzels.
I don't know, saffron.
Oh, he does love my saffron buns, but I only make my saffron buns like once or twice a year. I make them for Santa Lucia because they're the traditional ones, and then sometimes I'll make them for Easter or whatnot, but typically just once a year. And he loves them, and I make such a huge batch, and they're gone because I also make them for my friend. And I like special deliver them to her, and they're her favorite as well. Okay, I definitely think we'll be good with just 3 good sized potatoes here. And now we're going to drizzle them with olive oil. You'll probably want about a tablespoon and a half. You want enough that each potato will get coated with it, but it doesn't need to be glistening on it. Then we're going to add some flour here. This is going to give you a nice kind of breaded, almost like those like steak fries that you get from a restaurant. It just gives it a nice little, almost like a battered fry. Just about a tablespoon or so. Do a pinch more. And then we're going to do, for our spices, onion powder. This is going to give it a lovely flavor as well. We're going to do about, I want to say a tablespoon. It's going to give it a nice golden color. And then we have our seasoned salt. This stuff is great. It has delicious flavor. And this is like that nice seasoned fries flavor that you get at like, with your steak or whatnot. We're going to put in about a teaspoon and a half. And then just a little shake of panko breadcrumbs. It's going to add a little bit of crunch to it. Give you little crunchy, tasty bits. Now we're going to go straight in here with our hands. And we're just going to toss our fries in that oil and flour mixture until every single one is coated up with all those delicious spices and whatnot. You want to make sure none of them are stuck together and that they're well coated, because that's where all the good flavor is. And so you need to kind of do it in a nice big bowl too. That way you can really toss them. There we go. So I think we have them just about mixed up. Beautiful. Now I'm going to grab my baking sheet, and I'm not sure why I put parchment paper down. I wasn't thinking my pretzels use parchment paper. I love to cook my French fries on the metal. I think it crisps it up a little bit nicer. So I'm going to dump them out, and then we're going to spread them out evenly across where we don't have any resting on top of each other, because if they're resting, they're not going to get crispy there. So use a really big sheet pan if you have it, or you can always double it up. I try to have mine all on one pan so that it can be on that top oven, you know, getting that nice direct heat for the crispiness for as much as possible. We'll spread them out. And it's okay if they're like, you know, tips are touching. You just don't want them resting on top of each other or too much touching onto it, because then you won't get crispy all the way around. And this gives you, I mean, they're going to taste very close to being like a fried French fry, but they're not. They're, you know, of course, a bake, but it gives you that nice kind of crispy base to it that's just delicious. And I will say 3 good-sized potatoes will give you a lot of French fries. Spread these out, although some of these are quite long. Okay. We're going to pop these in the oven, but we're going to give them a few minutes. I want to get a couple things prepped out because my oven's at 450, because that's what my bread is going to, our buns are going to bake at. And I don't want them to get overcooked or have to sit too long at the end. Okay, rinse a little bit of that oil off of our hand. And now we can go and start shaping our pretzel buns and get ready to boil them off here. So I'm going to turn my water on to a nice and high. And then I'm going to get my dough, which is a yeast dough, which is proofing in the oven. And he is definitely puffed up. So I had him proofing in the oven for the last hour and a half. Again, this is just a basic yeast dough. I do believe I have this recipe card available for everyone. This is my pretzel dough recipe. So instead of shaping them like a pretzel, I'm going to shape them into little buns. And so you'll have a pretzel bun, and you just boil them that way. This is 1.5 times the recipe, so I wanted to have enough to have, I think I have like 10 pieces of pork tenderloin, like small ones, so I want to make sure I have enough. I'm going to double check. I actually think I have 12. So we're going to make 12 buns. So I always just kind of divide it and try to make them as even as possible. And then we'll shape them and start boiling them off. Okay.
You have a question? Are these sourdough?
These are not. These are my it's a good old yeast recipe. I had been told by my 13-year-old son that I am never allowed to make these sourdough. I am never allowed to change this recipe because he loves it so much. And he's kind of crazy. He's not the biggest fan of sourdough, which is crazy, but he loves this recipe. So now for shaping into our buns, you're essentially going to kind of pull it together to where, you've got all of it pinched down to the bottom, and you're forming this nice kind of flat, like circle ball, but it's going to be flat. And just pinch it here together at the bottom. And you don't want it to be too bulbous, so kind of stretch it out, because you want it to be, again, you don't want it to be a big poof ball, but more of a bun. And there we've got our first kind of pretzel ball all shaped up. And I just kind of start by pinching it together, the bottom, to kind of make a ball. And once you have it pinched, you kind of flatten it out just a little bit. Again, you don't want to keep it too round or you're not going to be able to get a good, nice, even cook on it. And they are going to puff up. So these are so good. Now, the only difference between making pretzel, like actual pretzels and then the pretzel buns with it is, you shave it, but pretzel buns are going to have to cook a little bit longer because you do have a slightly bigger, area that it needs to bake through. So you add about a minute or two to the baking time. Here we go. But they are easier to shape up, so that is nice. This is a really delicate, like a soft dough. I will say it's not stiff at all. It's nice and light, which is lovely. Here we go. And even though I try to make them as even as not, there's going to be some buns that are like ginormous and some that are normal size. Big, little, normal. I know you could get out a scale and you could measure it, but that's just not me. I'm more of the guesstimation type person.
You had a question? Who carved the pumpkins in the background?
So my kids did. Now for this one is Evie. She made a cat. This one's Torrens, and they did theirs on their own. And then this is Teddy's, which we have kind of buck teeth for it. It's a beaver. He wanted, and then there's Jack, which is evil and conniving because Jack is evil and conniving. Sweet. Lena will carve hers tomorrow. Lena and I will be having a contest. So I already had my dry line practice on the other two. But she has to study for 3 AP exams tomorrow. So she is little. I said, we can do it tomorrow because our kids don't have school on Friday, which is brilliant if by the school system, I think. Who wants to teach kids on Halloween? They're going to be amped up and crazy. Normally they take the day off, like the day after Halloween, and they close down for like professional development. But this year Halloween's on a Friday. So the day before, I thought, or the day of, is actually wonderful. Especially because I believe this weekend is daylight savings. There we go. We're going to get these out. And I'm going to start dropping some of mine in here in just a second, but I'm going to put my baking soda in. So with my pretzels, I do not do a lye bath. I do baking soda. And you're going to add about 1/4 cup of baking soda to your water here. And that's going to help give it a nice kind of chewy texture edge on the bagel and the coloring that gives you a little bit of that pretzel taste without using like caustic lye. Now, it's not going to give you the crunch on it. So these are like the traditional like American soft pretzels. They're not going to have that super, how German pretzels are typically got a little bit of a crunch firmness to it. These will have a chewier skin to it, but are lovely. Get these last few. When we boil them, we're going to boil them roughly the same time as our pretzels, about 30 seconds on each side. Let's get these last two shaped up, and then we can start doing our boil. And then we'll, of course, brush them with an egg wash and bake them in the oven. These bake pretty quickly. We'll bake them at 450, and they're going to just take about 9 minutes to bake up, maybe a smidge more, again, depending on how big you make them. So we've got our base little pretzels here, or pretzel rolls going out. And perfect. Okay, I'm going to go. Let's put these in the oven now so that we can start crisping them off to bake. So again, 450. Now our water, when we come back, is nice and hot. So we will put those in there to start boiling off. I'm going to start these on the top, but when we put our our pretzel buns in, I will move them down nice and low. I have it set at 450. These take about 15 to 20 minutes to bake up. So they cook up pretty quickly, especially since they're smaller cylinders. So let's get our pretzel buns going. I'm going to bring my baking sheet over here because we'll be transferring them onto it when we are ready. And I'm only going to boil a few of these off at a time because I have to worry about what I can fit in there without them kind of touching too much. I think I can get 3 at a time. And then what we're going to do is we'll boil them for about 30 seconds, and then we do our little poke, which flips them over, and then I'll remove them using a slotted spoon. The slotted spoon is going to help you prevent you from taking any of that extra liquid over here. And again, you can boil them up to a minute. And the more you boil them, you're going to get a slightly chewier crust on it. I find 30 seconds is perfect for it. So let's get this side, and we're going to do it on each side. There we go. And then we'll remove them out, and they're going to be wonderful. Okay. While we're waiting, I'm going to just do a little slide over here. That way I can start working on my apples between dropping these guys in. Because I said waiting for pot to boil is no fun. Okay, I think we're ready to take our first batch out. And again, slide this tray just a little bit closer. Shake off any of that extra liquid. And we're going to just place them on our baking sheet, knowing that these are going to puff up some, so don't place them too close. They'll be dimpled now, but when they bake up, they will round out. And it is essential you have to boil them. You can't not boil them. Yeah, you need that. It's going to give you the nice chewy kind of the pretzel texture.
Your question, is this recipe posted?
I have my recipe card for my pretzels, and that's the same recipe, except I just shaped them slightly different. So yes, I have that posted. I believe I gave that out in the spring as a freebie for everyone. This is, again, an all yeast recipe, so no sourdough in it. And from start to finish, it takes about 2 hours to make, so it doesn't take too long to do it. I'm going to work on my apples here, and then we're going to poke each one of these over.
And do you have a cookbook?
I do not have a cookbook. I do post recipe cards for our members, and I do have lots of live videos up there for everyone, so kind of like a digital one, but that is one of my goals for this upcoming year, is to work on a cookbook for everyone, because I get asked that a lot. But I do have those recipe cards for our members, and I try to make sure I put everything online, or all of our lives up, so people can recreate my recipes as well. It's just finding the time. You know, it surprises me just how quick your day goes by. I mean, there's days where I'm just like, it disappeared out of nowhere. It's always the days when you think you have the more time, that's when they go. Okay, let's slide that. These are going to be delicious. Pretzel buns are just one of my favorite things. I just think there's just so much in the regular bun. Okay, we've got our first 6 out there. Let's get these guys. And I will say, if you're nervous about boiling in the water and removing out, it's not that scary. You don't burn yourself. You don't really splash. They'll drop in there nicely and get a slotted spoon. It's not as scary as you might think. I know sometimes like the whole boiling the dough in the water can be a little daunting, but it's not, and it's going to make the best pretzel buns ever. Fresh, like, you know, when you go to the mall and you eat like the Annie Ants, these are what they are. Flip these guys. Perfect. And we'll get this next kind of set going up. We're going to do a spiced apples because, again, I feel like with pork chops, I'll have to get that in a second. Spiced apples just work well. And my kids absolutely love spiced apples. It's one of those fruits that everybody kind of agrees on, which is nice. We ate a lot when we went to the apple orchard back in September, but I haven't made spice apples. I think I made some like a week or so ago, but they love it.
What kind of apples are you using?
This is actually just a random collection in my fridge. I have two that were from our apple orchard that I found tucked back, which were still great. And then there's some Fuji and some Gala. So they're, that not a super sweet, but like in a nice kind of tartness one. I'm going to add some lemon juice to them as well as brown sugar and cinnamon. Now, Granny Smith are also a great one to use, but just because you don't have a Granny Smith or Super, you can use a lot of them. I like the firmer ones so you don't get mushy apples. So that's why I like using like a Gala or a Fuji or a Pink Lady. Those work well. Okay, should probably put our next batch in there, not just the spoon. Let's get these guys in. Here we go. And I always like to put them in upside down so that when I'm transferring them out to be baked, that it's the top side. So I don't have to do any flipping. Just makes it a little bit easier. Okay. Get these guys peeled up. Then we'll kind of chop them up. It's the one thing with apples I love apple desserts and apple things, but peeling apples is not my most favorite thing to do. But there's no way to really get around it because apple skins do not get like tender. They just get chewy and stringy and, so you have to peel them off. It's just extra work to get the goodness out of there. But you can't leave them on there or it ruins the whole texture of the spiced apples. Okay, let's pop these. There we go. Perfect. So just in about 30 more seconds, we'll pop those guys out. And then we're going to brush them with an egg wash and we'll put them in our oven to bake. I do not salt my pretzels until after they bake. Then I'll rub them with a little bit of butter and put the salt on it. I just like it that way. That way, typically when I do my pretzels, then I can decide how many I want sweet or whatnot, but we're going to do all of these savory, but it just stays off a little bit better this way. And since we're going to be using them in our buns, we're going to take them out and let them sit for a few minutes before we cut them in. That way they're not too tender. Let's pop these guys out. And some of these are going to be massive. Let's slide them. Here we go. And baking them on the parchment paper is just going to allow them to slide off and not get stuck to the baking sheet because they are going to be slightly sticky from being boiled in the water. But let me turn off my boiling water here. I'm going to slide that out of the way. And then we're going to brush our pretzel buns with an egg wash before we put them in the oven. Let me get my things. So 1 egg, and then we're going to add about a tablespoon of water. And we're going to mix that together, and that's what we're going to kind of brush over our pretzel. This is going to give our pretzel the nice kind of brownish, shiny color to it. So it's really important. You don't want to skip this one or you're going to have a really pale looking pretzel, and you want that nice brown color. There we go. I'm going to whisk it up, and then we're going to brush this over the top of each bun. And just use a basting brush or whatnot. Here we go. And again, make sure you coat it all because any spot that you miss when it bakes up, will know that it doesn't have it on there. And you're not going to use a whole egg, but there's just no way to split an egg. Here we go. And as they bake, they will actually smooth out even more. They're always a little dimpled when they come out, but then they're going to rise more in there and it'll be just wonderful. These are also great, like leftovers for sandwiches the next day. Cut them open, breakfast sandwiches, fry up an egg, some sausage, bacon. I'm already like thinking of, although I know these are probably going to get all eaten up. And then Torin will be like, make sure I get one in my lunch tomorrow. Here we go. Brush these guys all up with our egg wash. And again, this is on our yeast pretzel dough. And for this, I used about, 2.25 cups of warm water, a tablespoon and a half of yeast, and 5 tablespoons of brown sugar. And then you let your yeast bloom. And then I added in 6 tablespoons of melted butter, a tablespoon of salt, and some, 6 cups of bread flour. So it's a lot on here. These are so good. Again, I'm just going to make sure I get all these nice sides around. And we're going to go pop these in the oven at 450. I'm going to move my fries down so that these get that top heat, because baked goods always get the top. Let's get my oven mitt on. Here we go. So we're going to bring our pretzels down. This is going to allow them to cook without getting too much direct heat on it. And then here our beautiful pretzel buns are going in. I'm going to set my timer for 9 minutes, and then we'll check on them. Oops, not 90. That would be way too long. And we'll see if they need a little bit more or not. Depending on how big you shape them or whatnot, you'll know when you look at it. Okay, let's get these in here cooking up so they can cook while we make our pork chops or our fried pork tenderloins, so not pork chops. We're going to do a quick little dice up on them, and then we're going to throw them in there, cook with a little bit of butter, brown sugar, whatnot. I think I've got one more in here, and then we're all peeled up. Okay. Let me grab. It's easier to chop with a knife than it is with a little paring knife. So just do thin little slices. That's going to allow them to get nice and tender a little bit faster. If you leave bigger, thicker chunks, they take much longer to cook. I always say that when you're also making an apple pie, don't do big chunks of apple in your apple pie, or you're going to have firm apples. And my secreting way of doing my apple pies is cook your apples a little bit beforehand. That way they get nice and tender. You just don't want to waste all of your effort and still have really firm apples. There we go. And you can see they cut up pretty quick. And we're going to slide those in, and then we're going to bread our pork tenderloin. So I have 12 thin cut pork tenderloins, those really thin ones you get from the grocery store. I never like to eat those straight up as like a pork chop, because I feel like since they're so thin, they dry out really fast, but they make wonderful like fried pork tenderloin sandwiches. And so we're going to do that. I'm going to season up the breading for our pork tenderloin sandwiches with some Lowry seasoned salt, onion powder, oregano, black pepper, because I feel like those flavors are really savory and they're going to work well, and they'll pair well with our fries.
You have a question for the pretzel buns? Do you use bake or convection bake?
I use regular bake. Convection bake will cause them to get too toasty too fast. So you want the regular bake. It's a little bit slower in getting that heat to it. I'm going to turn on my back burner to I'm going to start with, I want to say like a 7, so a little bit higher, but not the full temperature. And we're going to add in a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And we're going to use half a juice from a lemon. Now, if you have apple cider, You can definitely use that as well, about a tablespoon of it. I am like all out. This is like the seediest lemon ever, but I'm all out of my apple cider. Teddy really wanted some this morning, and so has it. He loves, normally never let my kids have juice, but apple cider is a different thing because when it's in season, squeeze a little bit more on that one. I just can't deny it. I remember growing up and having fresh apple cider in the fall. Okay, so we've got juice from half a lemon. We're going to add in about a half teaspoon of vanilla. This is going to give just a nice kind of smooth flavor to it. Takes away a little bit of the tanginess, but it's wonderful. We're going to add in about a teaspoon and a half of our cinnamon. If you want even more fall festive flavors, you can add in some pumpkin pie spice if you want to. And let me grab my little bit of butter here, like a pat of butter, so like a teaspoon or so. We don't need a whole lot.
You can go over what types of apples you use.
So this is just a kind of a conglomeration of them, but I have Fuji, Gala, and Jonathan's, which I believe were the ones that we got from the apple orchard. So a little bit of everything, but you want a nice firm tart apples. They make the best spiced apples. So Granny Smith is wonderful, Pink Ladies. Just avoid Red Delicious, Golden Delicious. They're more mealy and give you a little bit more mushy of a spiced apple. They don't hold their form well. Okay, we're going to mix this up and we're going to let these start to simmer up. And let's work on our pork chops here. So let's get our dredge going. I'm going to pour my olive oil in so we can turn it on when we get closer to it. Here we go. We want a good thin layer. It's going to be about a cup, but enough to coat the bottom of our pan because we're going to be flipping these both sides. So you don't need to have them completely submerged on here. We're going to add in, for this, we need about 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So 1, and always err on the side of having too much rather than too little, because it's no fun to make more in the middle when your hands are messy. Okay. So we've got those in here, and we're going to add in about 2 tablespoons of onion powder. This is going to give it a nice kind of golden, color to it, nice savory flavor. We're going to add in about a tablespoon and a half of Lowry seasoned salt. You definitely want to make sure you have that. I'm going to get this going so that it'll be kind of close when we get there. Oregano. We're going to add in about a tablespoon of dried oregano. I'm just going to use the rest of this. Always use more spices than you think. You don't want to have a bland fried pork tenderloin. It's just, if you're doing the work to fry it, don't do it. Add more than you want. We're going to add in about a half a tablespoon of paprika, which is going to give a really kind of amber fry on it. And then we're going to add in about a teaspoon of black pepper. And we're going to mix these up. I'm going to grab a fork here. We're going to mix them up. Then we're going to mix up our eggs, and then we will add in our panko breadcrumbs after we drudge all of our meat. But we want to have a nice seasoned first dredge. That way they get all of that flavor throughout. This allows it to get hit with a double spice. Because remember, only the breading is going to have the flavor in the pork chop, or the pork tenderloin. So you want to make sure it's nice. Okay, we've got that. Let's get our eggs. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I am done with this guy. Pop each yolk, and then we're going to just whisk it up until all of those yolks are mixed into the egg whites. That way it will coat it nicely. Don't leave any stringy egg whites.
You got a question? Where did you get those bowls?
These bowls are from Target. They were the Chip and Joanna Gaines stoneware collection from 2 years ago or something like that. They have a new kind of version of them out right now, which I also because I love them. I love their stuff. It's just simple and cute. But yeah, I found this. I don't make these anymore, but I absolutely love them. They're supposed to be a pasta bowl, but they're like my prep bowl for everything. Okay, that looks good. Let's bring our pork tenderloins. So I said I had our pork tenderloins right here. They're, the thin cut. You don't want them super thick because then you have to pound them out a little bit more. You still want to pound out the thin cuts. That is going to make them more tender. So just give them a good, couple poundings. You don't need to make them super thin because you don't want to have a sliver of a pork chop, but just thin them out a little bit. This is going to allow them to cook more evenly and make them more tender because pork, if you overcook it, it definitely is tough and dries out. Luckily, the frying method like this really kind of keeps it nice and tender. We're going to go check on our pretzels here. Let me wash my hands and then we'll head over there. Again, we want our pretzels to come out and sit for a few minutes before we fry up. So let's look at it. I'll take a quick peek and see if they're ready. And I say that because if you try to cut into a pretzel when it's hot, it's going to be very difficult. So you want it to be warm, but not super hot. Look at those beautiful pretzel buns. They are looking delicious. So I'm just going to feel them. They feel firm. Beautiful. Okay, let me get we're going to put the fries on, and I'm going to set my timer here for our fries. You know what? I might just, let's give a feel real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off my oven. That way they'll keep them warm, but it's not going to allow it to cook too much more. They needed like a few more minutes in there, but turning it off at 450 will allow them to stay nice and hot while also not overcooking them. But these are our beautiful pretzel buns. We're going to brush them over with a little bit of butter here in just a second and sprinkle some salt on them. But I'm going to let them cool just a smidge.
And a couple people asking for the recipe.
Yes, so the recipe, we do have this recipe card available for everybody. So you can always go on and just search for it. I gave it out into the spring. Now it's going to be under pretzels, like homemade pretzels versus pretzel buns. It's just how you shape them. Same process, just a little bit different shaping. Here we go. Get these guys all pounded up. And then we're going to dredge. So nice and doing this. Now, if you don't have a meat tenderizer, really, like, you can do any firm thing and just hammer it down. It doesn't have to have the little, little pokes on it. For the longest time, I used a garlic press because I never, ever use a garlic press. So I would like wrap it up and plastic wrap, and I'd hammer it with that. I finally, after I don't know how many years of making pork tenderloin sandwiches and saying, I need to get a meat tenderizer, I finally bought one.
15 years.
15 years. It took a long time, but I was like, I don't need it. It works fine. I don't need it. I needed it. Okay. I'm going to turn my apples down just a smidge. They're cooking up nicely. We've got them nice and low on there. And we're going to get those here. Let's dredge our pork chops here. That way we can get our first set frying up. It won't take us long. We're going to go through and get our first ones in the first dredge, which is really important for creating the binding for the second base, which is going to have our panko breadcrumbs in it. So just toss it in here. This is the seasoned up one. And these, since they're thin and cooked out, they fry up fairly quickly. They don't take too long to fry up, which is nice. And once we get through, then what we're going to do after this is we're going to put our panko breadcrumbs in there, and then we'll dip them into the egg wash and into the panko, and then they're going to go right into our oil, which should be nice and hot. I'm going to turn it. I had it turned down a little bit low because I didn't want it to get too hot while we were waiting.
Can you go over what's in the flour?
The flour, yes. So we have about 2 cups of flour with about 2 tablespoons of onion powder, a tablespoon of oregano, a tablespoon and a half of Lowry seasoned salt, a tablespoon of paprika, a teaspoon of black pepper. Yeah, I think that's it. So pretty simple but delicious. Okay, let's add about a cup of our seasoned breadcrumbs in here.
And would this be what you would do for a schnitzel recipe?
Very similar. They're very similar in the sense, but it's a little bit different. A schnitzel is going to have a bit more of a breadcrumb to it, and you're going to pound it a lot thinner, but it's very similar to it on there. I always say I love a good schnitzel. I haven't just made straight up schnitzel for my family in a long time, so I might have to do that because schnitzel is so good. My foreign exchange student, like the mom that I used to like when I lived with in Germany, she made the best schnitzel ever, and it was just so good. And of course, in Germany they make the best ones there. But we're gonna put it in here. Our oil is nice and hot, and we'll let it start frying off. We're gonna coat it and pat it down, and we'll get our next one dropped in there.
If there's any leftovers, do the kids ever take it for lunch the next day?
Yes, I already know that there's probably one of these sandwiches are going to be earmarked for Torrin's lunch tomorrow. He absolutely loves it. And I also try to make sure that I have enough leftovers for my parents to each have a meal with it, because I make all of their food. They're helpless. I think one of those times I remember my kids were like, so do they not know how to cook? But here. Oh yeah, I forgot to put them in here. Let's get there. Get one more sliding in. We can get 4 at a time, which will be perfect. Here we go. I'm going to rotate and get this is my hotter part of my burner. And then we'll get the rest of these done. Once you've got them hammered out to this part, it goes pretty fast on here. Once I get these breaded up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna butter our pretzel rolls so they're gonna stay hot for a while. If you butter them too soon after coming out, that butter will all drizzle off and you want it to stick a little bit more. Keep that flavor on there, and then we'll put our salt on them. But they should be, in just a few minutes, they should be cool enough to be able to cut through them easily. If you try to cut through them when they're piping hot out of the oven, they'll like snag as you try to do the cut, because again, it's a really tender yeast dough. So into our egg wash, into our seasoned panko, dredge. And with also, I was going to say, now you can do this with chicken. I'm doing pork tenderloin, but with it being nice and thin, it is going to cook up faster. Now, if you cook it a little bit thicker or cut it a little bit thicker, then they're going to need to take a little bit longer to cook on there. But again, when you're frying it, go slow and low. So do it over a medium heat. So I'll heat my oil up on high, but once it's sizzled with a drop of water, I bring that temperature down to a medium, because you don't want it to burn before you have a chance to cook it through. There we go. So 2 more left, and then we'll be in business. I might even be ready to make my first flip. And I always say, when working with breading, it's going to be really hard to try to want to do it with both hands. Keep one hand clean. This is my rule of thumb. Keep one hand clean so that if you need to do something else in here, you have a free, clean hand to do it. Because look, your hands are going to be covered. You're essentially, breading your fingertips.
I do have a question. Sometimes when they cook pork, it starts to curl up. How do you stop that?
So yes, that typically is because you have that strip of fat. If you snip that strip of fat, it will lay nice and flat when you cook it. And that's my tip when I'm doing like a pork chop that has that strip on it. Especially with the thin cut, they definitely do that. Just make a snip in the middle of where that fat is, and you won't have to deal with that curling. And if you forgot to do it afterwards, you can easily just cut it midway through. I'll do that a lot when they curl up. Okay, still need about a little bit longer. I've got a nice golden, but I want it a little bit darker. Okay, let's get our pretzel rolls. Give our apples here. Look at those. They're beautiful. Getting nice and tender. But let's get our pretzel rolls buttered and salted. Now, with pretzels, you've got to use pretzel salt.
You have a question? Sometimes the flour will slide off when it's in the oil. Any suggestions?
So that's where you have to do that first dredge, that where you put it in the flour and then the egg and then the flour. And that should help keep a nice binder. I always like to push down really firmly on it while I'm breading it to kind of keep it on there. But that first dredge is what keeps that breading on. The second trick is to minimize the amount you touch it in the frying pan. So just really touch it when you're ready to flip. That way you will have just it, you're not messing with it, so it won't fall off. So right now I'm rubbing some room temperature butter over the tops of each one of my pretzel buns. Here we go. And then we're going to put our pretzel salt on. And this is where I say you've got to use pretzel salt because it doesn't work well with regular salt. Regular salt is too salty. Pretzel salt has been like watered and flaked, so you get less of that sodium kick in it than you do with the other ones. It's easier just to sprinkle it. Here we go. My kids love the pretzel salts. I will tell you that. It just hits a little bit differently than regular salt. And I just buy mine on Amazon. Honestly, like you can't really find it in the store, but Amazon has, I'll say Amazon has everything, but that's where I get mine. Okay, let's get these guys flipped because I'm thinking they're ready. Beautiful. Perfect. So again, just a nice gentle flip over. I don't pinch them too hard because again, I want them to keep that breading on. But doing that first dredge really is going to allow it to stick on. Now, when we remove these, we're going to want to put them on some paper towels to soak up any of that extra grease. That's going to keep them nice and crispy. If you put them on just on a plate, where they sit and settle in that grease is going to make them a soggy. So I put them on paper towels like if you're going to make bacon. You can also put them on a cookie drying rack as well. The only problem with the cookie drying rack, you got to make sure you have a baking sheet or something under it because it will drip down on there as well. I find that the paper towels work wonderful. Okay. Let's get our apples here. We're almost done with them. As you can see, they're almost all getting to be this kind of nice light brown, slightly translucent. That's when you know that they're tender. Using a tart apple is going to make sure that your apples stay together and don't get mushy. Using like a Red Delicious or Golden Delicious, those are more mealy apples, which means they get mushy when you cook them. So those are kind of like the big difference when it works with that. I'm going to grab some cornstarch and we're going to throw that in there so it has a nice little bit of a gel to it. And then I'm going to grab my French fries out of the oven as well. So grab my cornstarch and my French fries. Look at these gorgeous, crispy French fries. Oh my goodness, my husband stole a pretzel roll. I walk away and he stole it. I told you they're so good and they're addicting. So here, again, these are our nice crispy fries. I love to do them on here because look at that bottom. They get that nice golden crisp. They're still really hot to touch, so be careful. You don't want to burn yourself. I'm actually going to move them over here. Slide this out. That way I can get them off this burner. Running out of space. You know, when I built my kitchen, I was like, I need a really big island, really good here. And then even at times, I'm like, I need it bigger.
You have a question? How many dogs do you have and what are their names?
So I have two, but you will see three dogs running around because I watch my mom's dog, my parents' dog, essentially anytime they're out of town or I'm like doggy daycare. She comes and has play dates at our house almost every single day because we live just a few miles away. So here we've got our nice golden, beautiful pork chops. Make sure you put the grease side down to keep them nice and crispy on here. We're going to put our next batch in our oil to start frying up. Oh, their names, yes. So the kind of the reddish one, the reddish brown one, he is named Loki because he is very mischievous. Then we have two that look exactly the same. One is Brunhilde, and her full name, she's got quite the name. She is, and we renamed her. She is Brunhilde Hildegard of the Southern Valkyrie. So she's very bougie, but she goes by Bruni. And then my parents' dog is Grace. But Bruni is actually Grace's mom. But my mom had Grace first, and then we got Bruni afterwards, and she was like 7 or 8 years old. But they look almost like each other, and they are very mischievous. Okay, let's put a little bit of our cornstarch in here to kind of thicken it up. And most of the time, you can, if you don't like that gel, just leave it plain, let it do. My kids and my husband love the I want to say that jelly apple pie filling. They like that gas station apple pie. So I sprinkle a little bit of cornstarch over it. I don't do it until the end. Make sure when you do it, you add a little butter in there. So we had butter in the beginning because that takes away part of that powderness of the cornstarch. And we'll mix in just a little at a time because, again, you don't want to put too much that it gets super thick, but just enough for all of this spices to cling onto the apples and makes it just wonderful. So you're going to use about a teaspoon or so, but again, I do it in little sprinkles at a time. And then we will be ready to kind of serve up our first plate for everyone because I won't make you guys sit and wait for all of our pork tenderloins to fry up. And then a last little bit.
You have a question? Something that's never cooked with cornstarch, does it have a flavor to it?
As long as you don't go crazy with it, it really does not have a bit of a flavor. It can be a little bit chalky, which is why I said you need to add a little bit of that butter because it takes out some of that chalkiness. The tricky thing is with cooking with cornstarch is when you add it into hot things like right here, it can turn into almost like a dumpling if you don't have it mixed in and smooth enough. So if you're going to use it as a thickener in soup, I always say remove it from the broth, remove some broth and mix it into the broth and then mix it in. Here we go. This is looking pretty good on here. So it's got just enough stick, but it's not super jelly. But no, it's luckily it's one of those things that it doesn't have that much of a flavor. Okay, let's see if these guys are ready to flip over. Just about. Beautiful. Slide that under there. Perfect. Gorgeous. And I'll rotate and let's get ready to serve up. I'll have to say, how are the buns since my husband already tried one?
Very good.
Good. I'm going to just slide my thing underneath our fries to lift them up, but look at these golden crispy edges. That's why I like cooking them directly on the metal because it gives you that almost as if they were fried in a pan, so delicious. Okay. I like to make them a nice big pile in the middle. And let's serve up here. I'm going to grab a plate. I'm going to grab my little bread knife here. And we're going to serve up our dinner. Okay. Just get a little bit closer. Okay. So let's start with our pretzel bun. So you're going to take it and we're going to cut it. And you got to make sure it cools a little bit so it cuts so nicely like this. But look at that gorgeous, nice, super soft, but it will have a chewy outside to it. So we've got our things. We're going to put our pork tenderloin in here. My favorite thing to serve on the pork tenderloin is a little bit of Chick-fil-A sauce. Makes the world go round. So we've got our pretzel bun with our Chick-fil-A sauce and our fried pork tenderloin. And then we're going to have a nice, good helping of our homemade kind of steak fries with Lowry seasoned salt and Parmesan, or not Parmesan, panko breadcrumbs and flour. And then for just the perfect amount of sweetness, we have our spiced apples with cinnamon and a touch of vanilla for just some great flavor. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day to kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that page, search for what we made, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gears and gadgets in it. So I've got my hex-clad pans, my big Nordic Ware baking sheets, my Dutch ovens, all the different things that I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.